combined. In it the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon his soul. Ramadan, 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 Ramadan.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan live, all the way from Denver, Colorado, and this is Ramadan Spirit from the United States of America. The beauty about this show that every 2 days this show airs from a different part of the world. Sometimes from London, sometimes from Dubai, sometimes from Saudi Arabia, and other places where you get a taste of the places where Islam went to. Brothers and sisters in Islam, it is our turn to get a taste of Ramadan from the United States of America. The show is live. You can actually call us. The number is 720-222-0158, and hopefully the number will be shown on the screen momentarily. We would like you to give us a call. Brothers and sisters in Islam, I'm joined today with Qusair Mohamed Bai. He is a civil rights attorney here in Colorado, and his work, alhamdulillah, is across the country, is nationwide. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Qusair. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me.
Ramadan Mubarak to you, and
Ramadan.
good to have you on the show, and it's a pleasure. And why didn't you take a minute or so, just let the viewers know who you are and what you present, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. My name is Qusair Mohamed Bai. I'm a civil rights attorney here in Colorado. We have one of the largest civil rights law firms in this part of the country, and all the lawyers at my law firm, all we do is we protect against corporate and governmental intrusions into the rights of us as citizens of the United States.
Certainly the spirit of the show today is the rights of a minority, being Muslims living in the United States, and how much rights do we have. Especially, let's begin with Ramadan. This is the month of fasting. Ramadan is an extremely demanding time for Muslims because of the rituals that they have to attend to and fulfill, and they would require certain accommodation by their workplaces and or even schools. And are they entitled?
Yes. So in America, and many times it's state by state, but in federal law, there are tremendous amounts of rights, and most of the time, in my having done this now well over a decade, I have found that Muslims don't know their rights and don't exercise their rights correctly. There's been some tremendous civil rights eras in America, and many of the rights that were born out of the civil rights era in the 60s protect Muslims as well. So in the workplace, to answer your question, Muslims have many rights. They can ask for specific religious accommodations, and there is a high burden upon an employer to agree and accept these accommodations. There was a case just a few weeks ago, a very high profile case called the EEOC versus Abercrombie, where a woman who wanted to wear a hijab.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually an Abercrombie scarf that she wanted to wear, and Abercrombie said no. And she took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the highest court in the land came down very hard against Abercrombie, saying, no, you must allow this sister to wear a hijab. And that case, importantly, was brought by the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That is the federal government of the United States. So it was the federal government representing a sister against the corporation, and it was a great result.
Okay, a Muslim, for example, want to grow his beard. A Muslim want to pray at the workplace. You know, we pray 5 times a day, and sometimes it's extremely difficult for a lot of brothers and sisters to leave their workplace. Is the workplace required by law to provide such facilities for Muslims?
What the law says is that every single workplace and every single request for an accommodation is analyzed through a case by case. But the general principles of the law say yes, men are permitted to wear beards as a form of religious expression. There has been very few times, actually, where beards were not allowed. One of them that came to mind was it was in a chemical plant, and as part of the job, they had to wear respirators, and they determined that the beard would not allow for a complete seal of the mask. And in that situation, it was determined that it was a part of the job to be able to wear this mask. And they actually just said if you could shave the place so that it could seal, you could even have a beard then. So these things, they're often called grooming codes, where men are required to look clean shaven, and those are largely frowned upon and oftentimes violate the law. And in prayer, this is a 10-minute, 15-minute break at most. By law, employers are required to give breaks. And so an accommodation to reshuffle when a traditional break is taken, it is not a burden at all on most employers. So it would be hard pressed for an employer to say that, no, I'm not going to allow an employee to take a 15-minute break and to pray.
Of course, you know, we're having viewers all over the world, basically Africa, Asia, and totally Muslim countries. So what we're talking about may be not very relevant to them, and that's the essence of the show, is we want to give them a taste of living as a minority in a majority non-Muslim community. And this is where Muslims are. We're a small minority within that big country, and we want to let you know, dear brothers and sisters, if you're living in Egypt, living in Saudi Arabia, living in Pakistan, living in Nigeria, we understand that alhamdulillah, you live in a totally Muslim country where you don't have to go through this, but we wanted you to get the spirit of Islam, the spirit of Ramadan in the United States of America. Brother Qusair, right now we're really noticing you know, a mounting Islamophobia trend, or whatever the word here. I happen to travel nationwide, and I can tell the looks are increasing, and the suspicious looks. And in some cases, you know, when I sit next to a passenger, you know, I have to give him, you know, I let him know I'm a preacher, and then I right away say that I preach the peaceful version of Islam. Don't worry about it. You know, how can Muslims face this in general, and how much can they take as a result of Islamophobia in this country?
Sure. The civil rights era protects a significant amount of rights. In workplace, for example, discrimination because of your being a Muslim is absolutely not allowed. If you are being denied promotions, being denied jobs, if you are being discriminated against, if you are facing abuse in the workplace, that has been outlawed for almost 50, 60 years now in this country, and there are strong legal protections. In places where you go to shop, at grocery stores, things like that, businesses may not discriminate against you because you're a Muslim, or because you're an Arab, or because you're from an African country. Those, again, those are called public accommodation laws, and that is absolutely forbidden. And Muslims should learn their rights. And there are so many organizations all across the United States, like the ACLU, that protect the rights of Muslims, where Muslims can learn. But in terms of Islamophobia, one of the more complicated issues in America, in Ramadan spirit, is what we call the First Amendment in the United States. And many people, especially from Muslim countries, don't understand how complicated the First Amendment is. You, as we know, have had some issues in your own congregation dealing with neighborhood associations who are Islamophobic, that don't want you to be able to create a Muslim recreation center.
Yeah, the bus ad, for example, and the Muslim recreational center, yes.
Sure.
Yes, yeah.
So let's take those into.
Yes.
Here in Colorado, there were bus ads.
Right.
Where they were nasty, they were anti-Muslim, highly Islamophobic, incorrect, and they were on the sides of buses. Well, that is the right of the First Amendment, to allow people to express anti-Muslim sentiments. We, as a community, also have the right to express our own messages. And in that case, we confronted these messages of hate with a long, unified message of love.
Right. This is what we're required to do as Muslims anyways, you know. idfa billati hiya ahsanu sayyi'a, repel the bad with good. That's the character of someone who believes. So, true.
But it's the same right that allows them to speak against Muslims. It's the same right that allows us to set up a mosque, a recreation center, where we choose, without having to get approval or blessings from a neighborhood that may not like Muslims. It is our right. We get the right of association, and no one can tell a Muslim where they can set up or do business because they don't like Muslims. So it's a complicated law, and Muslims need to remember that even some of the most anti-Muslim messages and themes that we encounter, those are the same things that protect us. So Muslims do not get to pick and choose which parts of the First Amendment.
So basically the point that you're making here is we have in America, in the Constitution, something called the First Amendment, which allows people to express their views. But at the same time, the First Amendment offers protection for minorities to establish their own organizations and have their own houses of worships and so forth. So it goes both ways, basically. It's a coin with two sides. You have to swallow the other side to be able to entertain or have your own little thing going there. Recently, and I know this is very controversial, the legislation of same-sex marriage. Me as an imam living in the United States of America, we know this is against the divine law, and this is not what Islam teaches. This is actually a Mosaic law. Just go and open the book of Genesis and read the story of the two tribes or two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, and what happened to them as a result of such an act. So it is a divine legislation, basically. Now you get the Supreme Court legalizing such an act. Now, how much space do I have as an imam to preach to my congregation that this is not lawful in the sight of God, in the sight of Allah, even though it's lawful in the sight of the Supreme Court, without being singled out or picked on and hopefully not arrested? I think this is something that if you can shed light on would be really necessary.
Yeah,
please.
so you as an imam get to practice 100% and say what you want about your religion. This is protected by the First Amendment. Just because now in the country same-sex marriage is lawful doesn't mean that you don't get to preach the fundamental tenets of Islam. Alcohol has been legal in America for a century.
True, yeah.
Tobacco, in some parts of the country now, even marijuana is legal.
Legal, yeah.
But if you were to get in front of your congregation and say marijuana is haram,
Right.
no one would be able to tell you otherwise. That is the beauty of the First Amendment.
The same principle applies.
Correct.
Yeah, so there is no difference between this one and this one, basically. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
If two gay Muslims wanted to come to you and say it's
There is no such a thing, gay
all right.
Muslim. So,
but if
yeah,
if two gay individuals came to you and said, I want you to marry us, you don't have to marry them.
Well, I will not do it.
No, but the law
They
wouldn't.
shouldn't be coming to me.
I know,
I'm
but
the last one to
But
come.
but the law wouldn't require you to
Yeah,
do that.
no,
Just
no.
because it's the law of
No.
the country.
But recently, Qusair, we had the situation in Texas where Islamophobia really got people to rally in front of a mosque. And the same thing happened, I think, in Phoenix or somewhere in New Mexico, in that part of the country too. Even having guns on them while they are standing in front of the congregation. I mean, where is the law? If Muslims would do this, I'm telling you, the media would make, you know, a story out of this. And where is the law? Where is the law enforcement once it comes to people standing in front of a mosque, rallying and calling one another with their machine guns?
So what you're asking is, what are the limits of free speech?
Right.
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 And in America, the limits are broad. It is a tough law. And this, where people came, they were presumably on public sidewalks around a mosque, and they were saying, bring guns and show your dissatisfaction for Muslims. That is pretty close to the line.
Mm-hmm.
A gun, Muslims need not take threats of violence. Threats of violence are never protected expression under the First Amendment. Muslims should never feel that they are unsafe, that their families are unsafe. And certainly showing of weapons is a big show of fear. But in America, and especially in Texas, open carry laws are allowed. People can carry guns.
So that's a state law.
That's a state law. In many states, people are allowed to open carry weapons, and that is, it's a very controversial law. It's scary.
Yeah, for the viewers, you know, the United States is so many states, something like 52 states now? Yeah, so each state has its own state laws, but there are some federal laws. So when we say a state law, that's the local law, a federal law that is the umbrella upon every state. Is that accurate?
Right.
Yeah. So now the issue of, you know, us speaking out against Islamophobia and combating it and you know, I always preach to my congregation the best way, just, you know, be nice, you know, just repel the bad with good, and, you know, but not everyone can do this. You know, not every Muslim can do this. What sources do they have in this country, whether in the state or in the county where they live, in order to seek help? You know, lawyers like yourself are not, you know, every place. They are not available. And I receive so many calls from my congregation, for example, needing, you know, help with respect to similar situations like this. Are there state offices or county offices where they can actually go and report this and seek help from there?
Right. Almost every single state office has a civil rights board, division, commission, a human rights commission. There are government agencies that help protect the rights of Muslims. There are non-profit organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union that are almost present in every state that will help and advise people, Muslims, of their rights. It's important for Muslims to understand where the source of the Islamophobia is coming from. If the Islamophobia is coming from work, from the government, from business, it need not be tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about education, and Muslims must educate themselves as to laws of the United States.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that, you know, Muslims have not been proactive in that field, you know, but hopefully this is an invitation to organizations, Muslim organizations and communities to become proactive in delivering, you know, the message of Islam to the people there and letting them know who they are. Let's take, for example, you know, the situation where we have Dar al-Tawheed, the rec center that we refer to. We ended up purchasing that place, and by all of a sudden the neighbors just, you know, trying to limit our, you know, options once it comes to operating that place. And I'm sure so many communities in America are faced with this, and they have to go to the city and get approvals for this and get approvals for that. How can this be handled in the best manner?
Zoning laws have traditionally been some of the worst culprits for discrimination. They'll use zoning and fire codes and create extreme bureaucracy and red tape and make it difficult that other churches wouldn't have to. What do? You need to have attorneys. Unfortunately, in America, unlike many places in the world, you need attorneys for everything. And you need to know your rights. There are so many rights, but you must know how to enforce them, and you must detect when you are being subjected to unlawful discrimination. So the rec center and this HOA.
The HOA is the Homeowner Association. Viewers, basically the neighborhood forms an organization which simply, I would say, governs the behavior of the individual owners of the houses and different facilities within that neighborhood, and they have some authority over you, more or less. Is that accurate?
Right. There are neighborhood restrictive covenants.
Right.
But what the covenants don't do is they don't trump
the
First Amendment in the United States.
Right.
The covenants don't permit selective enforcement against Muslims. So in that situation, if the HOA, and there's a very few, you know, it's a very few people on the HOA, some very specific bigots against Muslims, we will have no problem dragging that HOA into federal court to make them stop and seeking injunctions against them. There are strong laws that protect us from this type of behavior. Hopefully it can be resolved diplomatically through peaceful community relations. But if it can't, Muslims need to be prepared to go to court and enforce their rights. And this is something that I have found for Muslims across the country. They're shy when it comes to in their own personal families. They're very aggressive and they're very loud. When it comes to actually enforcing their rights against in the community, they're very shy. They're very passive. And this is not America. America is a quite aggressive place. And you have to be tough, and you have to get into it with other people, sometimes through legal conflict. And that's important for Muslims to know, is sometimes being passive, sometimes just saying,
it's okay, it will pass.
It's Allah's will.
It is all Allah's will.
Yeah, but
there's no question about it.
But they'll just resign and say this is...
Yeah, we have a will within Allah's will. If Allah wills for our will to pass, it will pass. But I think the point you're trying to make is we must seek the means available within our position to better our experience living in the United States of America. I think that's the point you're trying to make.
If we look at, in America, Jews and Muslims are almost the same size of population. But Jews have been historically known to use these types of, they go to court. There are so many Jewish attorneys, and they're not afraid of using their Jewish attorneys to create space for them. There are many Jewish legal organizations that are dedicated just for civil rights. Civil rights organizations for Muslims, they're coming. There are some, and they're growing, and they're growing in sophistication and power. But Jews have had these organizations now for over 100 years, and they are not afraid to call out. They're very Jewish organizations are very sophisticated when it comes to media, for leveraging influence with their politicians. And but no one would ever guess that in America, Jews and Muslims are about the same size. And that's something that Muslims in America must learn to do.
You know, until now, you mentioned how large of a population we are. We're relatively large, as a minority. We don't even have a voice to basically the voices of Muslims. I'm talking about the media. Is we don't have one media outlet where we can come out and actually voice our opinion and say what we think, and all of this is very sad. Hopefully, inshallah, Huda TV will do something, inshallah. That's what we're
but the point is that they have to Muslims need to be able to use mainstream media to their advantage, and these are the types of things that as Muslims promote.
Yeah, we're going to have to go to a break now, so we're going to cut you off here, but we'll be right back. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, don't go away. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, dear viewers, welcome back. This is the segment where you can give us a call. 720-222-0158. This is if you're calling from the United States or Canada. If you're calling outside international, then please just make sure that you dial 001 before the number I just mentioned, and hopefully the number will be shown on the screen as well momentarily, inshallah. So dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, we really wanted beside educating our local Muslim community in North America and in the United States and Canada, we really wanted you today to get a taste of how us as Muslims, as a minority, Muslim community being a minority, living in the United States of America, and what we go through and the laws and all of this. So at least you know what we go through. It's not all dandy like they say you're living in America, then you're in paradise. No, it's a little bit more complicated than this, and that is why we're hosted by Brother Qusair Mohamed. I have to say that he has been an asset for our community here in Colorado. The years that I spent here, he has been out there and helping the community on individual levels, individuals and also the community at large. And we say Jazakallahu khairan for this, and we're hoping that you can help us shed some light now, because a lot of our kids go to public schools, and in public schools they spend a whole day almost. So there are meals, we do not eat pork, we have to eat dhabiha, halal, that's what they call halal. Also, our kids like to pray as well in schools. What is the leverage here? And we're talking about little children here. We're talking about kids. We're not talking about grown-up. Here we are, we're talking about the grown-ups a minute ago, and we're still saying that we're very passive. What about our children, and what can they do, and the means they have, and so forth?
Schools are one of the most difficult places where being a Muslim in America and our school public education systems is difficult. In public education, there's a strong push towards no religion in schools. There is a separation
of church and
state.
Yes,
and it is one of the most noticeable is in schools. So what prevents public schools from being able to go too much in Easter time and in Christmas time, where 95% of the students in a class might be Christian. They don't get to go into too much Jesus during Christmas. And things
can
like
you hold your thought? We do have a call from Colorado, actually Denver. Brother Adil, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're live. Go ahead, please.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Brother Adil, welcome to the show. Ramadan Spirit, United States. And do you have a question for us today?
Yes. I wanted to ask about the situation where a business owner is confronted with customers that are hostile to Islam, or they say they have some sort of verbal abuse, and it also affects other customers that are coming through. So what rights does a business owner have? Say for instance in an open market, such as a farmer's market or a flea market, and they're openly being discriminated against. What kind of rights would a owner have, a business owner, to go after a customer, or to have his rights fulfilled in some way?
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Adil. May Allah reward you. Brother Qusair, can we take his question and we'll go back to the school?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So the laws here in Colorado, and for the most places across the country, is that business owners may not discriminate based upon what we call protected categories, age, race, national origin, things like that, by their customers. And in this situation where a customer is being extremely openly violent, potentially abusive, they themselves are being discriminated against, store owners don't have to take that kind of abuse at all. A store owner in America, it is still a free market, as the brother said, and that no, they don't have to serve or tolerate that.
What about the customer is always right kind of principle?
As long as you are not denying a service to a customer because they are an Arab or because they are a Muslim or a Christian or something like that, then they're fine. And business owners don't have to serve or even tolerate that. And in fact, a business owner could at that point call the police and say, sir, if you don't want to leave my store, if you won't stop abusing me, you are disrupting other customers who are trying to reach here. They have the right to call the police, and the police will appropriately handle it.
Beautiful. We go back to the schools and our kids, and Christmas especially, should they celebrate, should they participate? These are all, an issue for a lot of parents, and they don't even know the legal premise on saying no to this or not saying no to this. And I cut you off, so maybe you can carry on from there.
Yeah. So this is one of the harder parts. So when you say it is not, it's always better in America and things like that, when it comes to raising a young Muslim family in America through public education, Muslims are mostly on defense. Have I seen in public schools that you can ask for specific accommodations when it comes to pork? Yes. And why has that been allowed? Mostly because it's because of our Jewish brothers that have been able to carve those things out for Muslims in the past. But are you going to be able to get, for example, halal in a public school?
No.
Probably not. But what Muslims need to understand is that they don't need to tolerate excessive Christianity being put onto their kids. And so they need to, as parents and as in a school system, they need to start asking questions. Why is it that you're making my child sing Silent Night, a Jesus song in Christmas?
Jingle bell.
Well, jingle bells. So those are things where we call them seasonal. They're secular. They're just celebrating Santa Claus and things like that. And whether a Muslim family wants to exempt their kids from that, that's a personal choice for the family. But when it crosses the line and it's becoming very much a Christian hymn, this is where parents need to get involved and say, why are you doing this? And
So parents actually can go to the school if they see that, for example, the decoration in the classroom is all Christian kind of decoration. They can go there and say no to that.
yeah, they can start lodging complaints. They need to start becoming active. They need to start getting with the school administration. And unless somebody actually speaks out against it, a school which has 95% Christian kids
They
will push it until somebody
Yeah,
says
it's no.
no. And the law is quite clear on this. It is not allowed in school. So just what protects your kid from Silent Night and Jesus hymns during Christmas time will prevent excessive Islam. But many schools are becoming much more global, that they're
Right.
embracing Eid, and they'll start celebrating Eid. Many school districts, one in, I think it was New York last
New
year,
York, yeah. They-
allowed for,
A day off.
declared a
Yeah.
day off
Yeah.
for, I think it was Eid al-Fitr.
Al-Fitr,
Yeah. So that's now taking, there's dangers to that, because now you're beginning to allow religion into schools, but then you're going to allow all religions into schools. So as Muslim parents, most parents who go through public education just don't see public schools as any source of religious education for their kids. They are just trying to protect their kids from other religions.
Law enforcement, especially post 9/11 and, Muslims being on the screen and the guilt by association and the treatment of the law enforcement to a lot of Muslims. What are the boundaries here? I mean, once
Yeah.
it comes to that.
So in the first 10 years after September 11, maybe 12, 13, 14 years, it was very much law enforcement against the Muslim community. The suspicion, the passing of laws such as the Patriot Act, which curtailed numerous civil rights of all Americans, but these laws were largely created in response to September 11th to allow for enhanced governmental surveillance, enhanced governmental investigation techniques into Muslims, where government could legally spy into Muslims. And this was quite a difficult time. Everyone knew that there were going to be moles in mosques, that they were actively surveilling, and it was almost, in many mosques, it was an open joke. We knew who your moles are, just come in and look at us.
One of the people was, we do have a phone call, or? Okay, it dropped. Okay, one of the people was telling me that, be careful because of, we do have a phone call, okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, caller. Alaikum. Brother Jamal, I believe. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Caller?
Well, until the caller comes
Yeah.
on. So, for those that are outside of the country, this is where being a minority in a non-Muslim country becomes a big problem, where you have the full force of the government, local, state, and federal law enforcement against you.
Yes, yeah.
And this is a problem. And what happened is there was very much a deterioration of relationships between the Muslim community and law enforcement. But it's not just here, as many people have seen. There's problems with law enforcement and the African American community. African Americans in places like Atlanta almost make up 50% of the state, or of the city. So there have been historical issues of communities of color, religious minorities with law enforcement, but times are slowly changing, not necessarily voluntarily because of the government, but there's been a lot of lawsuits, there's been a lot of pushback. Things like the stop and frisk program in New York have been determined to be unconstitutional, and Muslims are starting to avail themselves of the legal system more to stop saying, no, that's enough. And then because of things like the Patriot Act, many non-Muslims are also becoming quite leery about their own rights being violated. So
I want to say also, subhanallah, yani, in spite of all of this, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the United States of America. This is actually not my statement, is a statement.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. We do have a call. Wa alaikum assalam. Caller, you're online, you're live on television. Assalamu alaikum. Name and state.
Jeffrey Boyer, San Antonio, Texas.
Jeffrey, you have a question for us? This is Ramadan spirit, and the theme today is, the civil rights of Muslims living in the United States. Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I don't know if this would be pertaining to the same issue, but I have a thing with flying. Every time I fly, in country or out country, I have special codes on my ticket for searches.
SSSS?
Exactly.
Yeah, I experienced this a couple of times. It's not fun, right?
Not at all.
Yeah, I even called Qusair and he told me what to do and I got removed right away. That's what you need to do. Okay.
What?
I called Qusair, by the way. He's, when I started receiving those SSS on my boarding pass, I remember I was in California and he told me that you need to go, and I did a couple of things, couple of steps, and I was removed. But let me get Qusair address this. Do you have another question for us, Jeffrey?
That was pretty much the question that I had.
Jazakallah khairan. We'll have you address this. We'll go back. But please, we don't want to forget where we were talking. This is very interesting. But please, if you can address, you're aware of what SSS is?
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
So the airports have now
Yes.
become some of the probably one of the worst places in the whole country when it comes to curtailing and violating civil rights of everybody, but it's very much targeted. It feels like certainly the Muslim community has a disproportionate amount of complaints when it comes to this. And the government has two sort of takes on this. They have official ways through the Department of Homeland Security, through the Department of Transportation, to avail yourself, to start getting yourself these secondary type screenings that happen almost all the time. For domestic and international flying, you can go through these pre-screenings, get away. If you are a Muslim that travels a lot, then yes, you should absolutely learn and avail yourself to these programs. However, when we go back to things like the Patriot Act, these things, these enhanced screenings, these enhanced interrogations, these abilities to basically question somebody for no reason other than that they may have a beard or they're wearing a hijab. This just basic, it is racial profiling, it is Islam, profiling of Muslims at its core. Many in the government would say they're allowed to do it. And many in the community would say, no, you're not. But right now in America, and the status of the law and the status of popular opinion will permit these types of things. And so we are currently living in a climate and in a society where racial profiling against Arabs, racial profiling against those that have traveled to the Middle East 10 years ago, that a small child that did Hajj with their parents when they were 10 years old, and now that they're 18, they're going to ask a lot of questions about what were you doing in,
Doing tawaf around the Kaaba.
And this is how it is. This is, unfortunately, legalized discrimination against Muslims in America. And yes, Muslims have been able to chip away, and it's going to take, I say this not because we should accept it, and it's quite the opposite. Muslims, hopefully as generations go by and education and more Muslims are becoming doctors and lawyers and things like that, they will begin to push back. And this is something that needs to be fought with. But unfortunately, right now, when it comes to airports and things like that, Muslims are second-class citizens in America, and there's just no, you can't say it any other way. This is why we do what we do.
You feel it. You feel it. We go back to the subject of the schools and all of that, but there is something that occurred 2 months ago, and it happened in Canada. A female judge refused to sit on a case because one of the parties, I guess, was a Muslim woman wearing her hijab, and she actually requested her or demanded actually her to remove the hijab. What is this?
Yeah, I think that's an extreme example of Islamophobia by the government. These have been issues with issues of driver's licenses.
Right.
Many sisters have bad experiences where they are told by various, you find a very racist or bigoted teller or clerk at a motor vehicles, and they'll say, no, the only way for you to get a driver's license is to take off your hijab.
Okay, we do have a phone call, and then we'll go back to this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Yes, sister, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Recently I went for my immigration process, and I had to go to get my driver's license too. So, I was asked to take off the hijab just so they can see the face and the ears, everything properly in the picture. So, what a sister is supposed to do in a situation like that?
Jazakallah khairan, may Allah reward you. We'll get, so that's exactly coincides with what you're saying.
Yeah, it turns out now every county, every state, when it comes to licensing and photo pictures, are different. But in my experience, there have been exemptions for these types of things. Orthodox Jews have been around in this country for a long time, and their women have similar modesty requirements. And you will find that with this sister, I'm betting that it is either one office, one shift that is giving her a hard time. And what would I do? I would, where that sister was, I would contact her local ACLU, or I would find a civil rights attorney to become informed. Because no, most of the time, a hijab does not obscure the face. Of course, if we are talking about things like niqab and things like that, those become harder to justify. But hijab, which clearly shows a face, should never be a problem. That is more than enough ability to identify somebody through their face.
Yeah.
So
we still have almost 7 minutes of the show. Can we get on the positive? This is like
it's not spirit.
Well, the aspect of, we know as Muslims that we will be tested, and our Messenger ﷺ told us that Islam will reach as far as the day and the night reaches, and it will enter every single home, and we're certain that this will happen. And we're here at the outskirts of the world, basically with the Muslim world, and we're representing Islam, and we have to go through these laws, we have to educate ourselves. Where can Muslims go from here to gain that status that the Jewish community, for example, established for themselves in the United States? What about this? The African American community, now they have a president sitting in the White House. How can we get there as a community? What does it take?
There's a lot of actions that Muslims that I see don't do. many of the Muslim community here, at least in Colorado, they are refugees. They're first time, so we are, compared to, let's say, some of the other major religions and cultures, we're about 3 generations behind. What's it going to take? There needs to be a strong emphasis on education for kids. There has to be a strong emphasis on staying close to Islam, keeping your kids away from bad influences, and parents need to stay very vigilant. Once children of, let's say, a cab driver become accountants and engineers, and they experience, because in America, while we've talked about some of the bad things, some of the positive things, you can achieve anything in this country.
It's the land of dreams, they say.
It is.
Yeah.
We know this.
Yeah.
The imam can come and he can build a rec center by himself, just because of the power of children of parents that have no money at all can become anything.
It's true. We have to say that, you know. I mean, it's the reality.
Where they talk about the American opportunities, it is harder for those that are poor here, but there are opportunities that in other countries around the world don't exist. So that's one thing.
Education.
Muslims in America must start promoting and pushing education. Once the community becomes of a higher educated status, they'll be able to avail themselves. Second, Muslims need to not be so tolerant as to discrimination.
They do not need to be?
They should not be so tolerant.
Oh, I see. They should. You know, that's what we teach in the mosque. You know, just forgive. You know, they have that famous thing. Even so, slapping on the cheek is unlawful in Islam. That if somebody slaps you here, just give him the other cheek and move on. And that's not the case. You're telling me.
You've had the opportunity to go to African American mega churches in the South.
Right.
They are not saying, "Let's take it."
No.
These are communities that have taken to the streets,
right?
Demonstrated.
But we're talking about, you know, individuals. We should try to entertain that in an individual level. But
no, I say it symbolically in the sense that Muslims, as a
we really want to strike the balance between
whether it be a cultural thing or a religious aspect, they're very shy. They will take a lot of abuses.
Right. It is true. Muslims do that. They are not looking for troubles, but that brings them troubles.
They tolerate and they take a lot of abuses.
Yeah.
And that comes with the education process, being able to say, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to use our local ability and stop this, whether it be discrimination at work, whether it be discrimination by businesses, or whether it be institutional discrimination, such as at airports. Unless these are challenged and taken head on, Muslims will continue to take abuse.
But you know, I think the issue that we're having, Brother Qusair, here is, like he said, America, for you to do everything, you need a lawyer. And lawyers are costly. They are very expensive. And for Muslims to pull all that stuff, they don't have the resources.
So that's a misconception. There are many attorneys throughout the country that do this because it's the right thing to do. Many attorneys don't charge, or they do what are things called, they take things on percentages. I have never in my entire career charged a Muslim 1 penny for a service. And we have helped countless Muslims, and caused many changes. So we are not, I hope that we're not unique. And I know of many other attorneys, and they don't have to be Muslim lawyers. There are good allies of the Muslim community out there, lawyers who have dedicated their careers to protecting those that are most disenfranchised, the most marginalized in society. And Muslims we are on the fringes when it comes to our rights. And so it is important for communities in America to start learning about those types of legal resources out there so that they can start putting their members at least in touch and creating relationships with various organizations that have the ability to help them. And it must come during good times, not if something bad has happened and then you're looking for a lawyer, it's too late. You need to have a long-standing relationship with attorneys and various nonprofits out there that protect Muslims.
True. Dear viewers, brothers and sisters in Islam, this was fascinating for me personally. I'm sitting over here and overwhelmed by, we really wanted you to get a taste. Yeah, this is Ramadan spirit still, but a taste of how Muslims do live their lives in the United States of America as a minority group, right? As a community, you know, not the majority of the community. I understand that a lot of you living in completely Muslim countries, but we wanted to get the opportunity for you to get that taste. Brothers and sisters in Islam, at the end of the show, I would like to say Jazakallahu khaira, Brother Qusair, for first of all your work for the Muslim community. I have witnessed that, and for you being here in the show. And the viewers, don't miss tomorrow, inshallah. We're going to have another edition of Ramadan Spirit coming from Colorado. I'm your host, Karim AbuZaid. Till then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In it the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon his soul. Ramadan, 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 Ramadan.